Good day, watchers. This might be the hardest watch I've ever had to review. Not because it's bad, not because it's flawed, but because it might be too perfect. And that's a strange thing to say about a watch, because today we're talking about the Omega Seamaster Aqua Terra 220.12.4 1.21.02.002. Yeah, this exact one. The white dial, the orange accents, the one that actually tries to have a personality. But here's the question that's been bothering me ever since I started wearing this. Why do I still feel almost nothing? And stay with me, because later I'm going to explain why this watch might actually be more dangerous than a bad watch. Because this version might quietly convince you that you don't need anything else. Welcome to Japan Time. I live in Japan, and I make videos of watches. New watches, old watches, but most of the time, just watches I want to add to my collection. And today, we're looking at what might be one of the most complete everyday watches ever made. And yes, before anyone asks, I am filming this on my tiny Japanese table again, and somehow, this watch still looks bigger than my workspace. At this point, I'm not reviewing watches anymore. I'm testing how much luxury you can fit into a Tokyo apartment. Now, this specific Aqua Terra hits a little different. You've got that clean silver white dial. But Omega didn't just stop there. They added these subtle orange accents on the seconds hand, on the minute track, even on that Seamaster text. And suddenly, this boring watch is trying to have a personality, but just a little, not too much. On the wrist, this is the 41mm version, and on my 6.5-inch wrist, it works. The lug-to-lug sits somewhere in the high 40 range, and those lugs curve down just enough to hug the wrist. The thickness is a little over 13mm, so it's not exactly slim, but it doesn't feel bulky either. And paired with this rubber strap, this is where things shift, because now it feels less like a dress sport hybrid and more like a relaxed everyday watch. Something you can wear walking around Japan, hopping on a train, grabbing coffee, and not think about it. And after a while, you actually forget you're wearing it, which is great, until you check your wrist 3 times just to make sure it's still there. Because this might be the only luxury watch that disappears better than some of my cheaper watches. Now the case, still classic Aqua Terra. Brushed on top, polished on the sides, very clean transitions, very controlled, very Omega. It reminds me of something like a Rolex Datejust in terms of finishing philosophy. But this feels less formal, less polished in attitude, even if the execution is just as sharp. But again, nothing here is trying to impress you loudly. Then we get to the dial. And this is where this reference tries to break away from the boring label. That horizontal teak pattern is still there. But on this lighter dial, it almost disappears, unless the light hits it just right. But then, that orange seconds hand cuts through everything. And suddenly, you notice it. It's like the watch is whispering the whole time, and then just taps you on the shoulder once in a while. Now, one thing we haven't talked about yet is the lume. And this is where the Aqua Terra does something very Omega. It's good, not crazy, not Seiko level torch in the dark, but clean, even, and reliable. The hands and indices glow with that cool white tone. And in low light, like when you're on a late train here in Japan, it's perfectly legible. You don't struggle to read it. But here's the thing, it doesn't try to impress you. It's not trying to win a lume competition. It's just there when you need it. And again, that word comes back, controlled. Even in the dark, This watch refuses to be dramatic. Flip it over. And this is where the personality actually lives. Inside is the Omega Caliber 8900. And this movement is just overkill in the best way. Coaxial escapement, META certification, anti-magnetic resistance up to 15,000 Gauss, around 60 hours of power reserve, and that independently adjustable hour hand that makes traveling so much easier. And through the exhibition case back, you see the effort. The Geneva waves, the rotor, the movement actually doing something interesting. And it almost feels like Omega hid all the excitement on the back. Now I have to say this, because I live here in Japan, and it's impossible not to compare this to Grand Seiko. Because if you put this side by side with something like the Grand Seiko White Birch SLGH005, they're trying to do very different things. The Grand Seiko is emotional. You look at the dial, and it almost feels alive. The texture, the way it plays with light, it pulls you in, it makes you pause. The Grand Seiko looks at you like, look at my dial, feel something. This one looks at you like, did you check the accuracy today? This doesn't do that. The Aqua Terra feels more intentional, more engineered than emotional. Where Grand Seiko is trying to make you feel something, Omega is trying to make sure nothing goes wrong. And depending on what kind of collector you are, that's either a strength or the reason you keep looking at other watches. Now let's talk about this strap, because this rubber strap with that textured center and orange stitching, this might be the most personality this watch has. It's comfortable, it fits the theme, and it actually brings out those orange accents on the dial. And in real life, especially with the humidity here in Japan, this makes a lot of sense because summer here doesn't ask, it attacks. And this strap, at least it survives. Without it, this watch might fall completely into that safe category, but with it, it at least tries to stand out. And this is where I struggle with this watch, because when you look at it as a whole, it's incredible. Better movement tech than something like a Rolex Oyster Perpetual. More versatile than most watches you'll ever own. Dress it up, dress it down, wear it daily, travel with it. It just works. But here's the problem. When everything works, what do you fall in love with? Because the watches we remember, they're not always the perfect ones. They're the ones that made us feel something, even if they weren't perfect. And that's why I still call this the most boring perfect watch. Even this version, even with the orange accents, even with the rubber strap. Because this might be the watch that ends your collection. You buy this, and suddenly, you don't need anything else. But maybe that's exactly the point, because not every watch needs to be exciting. Some watches are just meant to be there every single day, quietly doing everything right. And the scary part is, you won't even notice it happening. One day you'll look at your watch box and realize everything else is just sitting there, looking at you, judging you. So here's my final thought. If you want something loud, something emotional, something that constantly grabs your attention, this might not be it. But if you want something that fits into your life so well that you stop thinking about watches altogether, then this might be one of the best everyday watches Omega has ever made. And now I want to hear from you. Does this version fix the boring problem? Or is it still too perfect to be interesting? If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss future reviews. Because here in Japan time, we don't just collect watches. We try to understand why we keep coming back to them. And maybe the scariest part about this watch is not that it's boring, but that one day you might realize it's the only one you're wearing.